The New York Times today explores the far-right radical infiltration of the GOP over the years in Florida's Miami-Dade County by the Proud Boys, the nationalist group at the forefront of the January 6th Capitol insurrection. There, the group has seen its largest political success by far in its concerted effort to influence the Republican Party from the inside at the local level. The Times reports that, quote, at least a half dozen current and former Proud Boys have secured seats on the Miami-Dade Republican Executive Committee, including, quote, adherents who face criminal charges for participating in the Capitol attack. Their effort has, as the Times puts it, quote, destabilized and dramatically reshaped the Miami-Dade Republican Party that former Governor Jeb Bush and others built into a powerhouse nearly 4 decades ago, transforming it from an archetype of the straight-laced establishment to an organization roiled by internal conflict as it wrestles with forces pulling it to the hard right. Joining our conversation, former FBI counterintelligence agent Peter Strzok and Tim Miller, who is back with us. Peter Strzok, tell me about this effort on the part of the Proud Boys and whether this is a unique thing happening in Miami-Dade, or is this just one very glaring example of a phenomenon that's taking place across the country?
Well, I suspect it's going on across the country. What's important for your viewers to know, John, is that, the Proud Boys aren't your strange Uncle Harry who hangs out with the John Birchers and complains about his sciatica at Thanksgiving gatherings. These are folks who, from the very top, Enrique Tarrio, who you mentioned, who was the former national chairman, along with 5 other folks, have been charged as part of a conspiracy to engage in the January 6th insurrection. There are folks down, another Proud Boy in Florida who is currently been charged with assaulting police officers, who also distinguished himself while he was under investigation by calling the FBI agent who was investigating him, reading his home address to him, and then later texting the FBI agent's vehicle identification number to him. These are folks across the board who aren't just in the far right wing. They're part of a group that has espoused violence, that is engaged in violence, and that has done that in a way that is being charged across the United States, primarily but not limited to the January 6th insurrection. So when you see these type of folks who are engaging in local politics, people need to understand this isn't just an extreme view. This is an extreme view buttressed by a group of people who have a history of engaging in violent activity. And that's not going to stop at the door when they roll into an executive committee meeting. That is something that they're bringing with them. And that's something that, as the New York Times article points out, is playing out with violence in these meetings in the Republican Party at the local level.
Yeah, I want to get to that a little more in a second. But first, I want to talk to Tim. Tim, I can remember in 2016 in the Republican nomination fight, seeing you down in South Florida when you were working for Jeb Bush, and someone I know you worked hard for and who you admired, someone who was a colossus for a period of time in the Florida Republican Party, the party that is as strong a governor as the state had ever seen politically until now, where Ron DeSantis is arguably stronger in some ways in terms of his control over the party. Here's the thing from the New York Times that speaks to this directly. Proud Boys member says that Jeb Bush supporters fell in line with Trump. Gabriel Garcia, 37, who's pleaded not guilty to charges from the Capitol attack, said the party was once the province of country club Republicans. I know a lot of people on the committee, way before me, were supporting people like Jeb, said Mr. Garcia, who lost the state house bid in 2020. But when Trump won, pretty much everyone started falling in line. Asked for an assessment of the party's evolving identity, Mr. Bush, your former boss, demurred. I am out of party politics and can't comment on what is going on now. I feel like the thing that Gabriel Garcia said, there's something I heard you say about what happened to the Republican Party. But talk about the Florida of it all and how this could have happened to what was once the party of Jeb Bush in the Sunshine State.
Yeah, look, I think that, well, first I just want to say that Patty Mazzei, who wrote this article for the New York Times, has been down there and was doing that in 2016 and before I was even down there. She knows Miami Republican politics. This is not a hair on fire report by, somebody from Brooklyn flying down to Miami and trying to make the Republicans look bad. This is like a reporter who understands the beat. And this is what is really happening within the party. And it's not just in Miami, it's across the country. Miami had been a hotbed of basically this sort of globalist, like the new Republican Party that was going to be pro-immigrant, right, and pro-trade. All the stuff that Marco used to be, that Jeb was for. It was a vibrant, diverse party. When you came to our announcement back in 2015, John, it might have been the most diverse single political event the Republican Party has ever had. There was just the Cubans and Venezuelans, right? Like this was what the Miami Republican Party was. It was supposed to be the future. That has been totally upended there and nationally, and been replaced by these thugs, these nationalists, anti-immigrants, immigrants, far-right activists. And in Miami, that's happening on the Central Committee. You're seeing it in other places actually on the ballot. People running for Secretary of State, Attorney General are insurrectionists. And the thing that frustrates me is a lot of people who used to be in my shoes, who are still in the party, your Marco types, kind of want to make it seem like, oh, we have our crazies over there, our state Central Committee, but so do the Democrats, and we've got responsible people at the top. That's not what is happening in the Republican Party. Right. Underneath the surface, if you go down to any of these local parties, the crazies, the Proud Boys, the far right, the nativists, they are taking over every single party institution at the local level all across the country. Miami is just a really stark example of it.
So, Pete, you just talked about how one of the consequences of this is like the meetings, the party meetings become more violent and more chaotic and more disruptive. That's one of the things in the Times piece. But I want to ask a longer term question, right, which relates to what are the Proud Boys in this for? And that may seem like a naive question, but I think it's worth asking. We know that after January 6th, the New York Times talks about how the Proud Boys dissolved their national leadership and started getting involved at school board meetings and town council gatherings all over the country. And then we have Phil Bump in the Washington Post asking this question. What's the far right trying to build power for? It seems very safe to assume that the Proud Boys and other extremists want power for a primary reason that Trump did too, to hold power in lieu of the left doing so. There's an inescapable racial aspect to this that emerges explicitly in the Proud Boys' embrace of, quote, Western chauvinism, a sense among many on the right that they, often meaning Christian whites, are embattled. Retaining power offers a form of protection. So, yeah, they say they're going to try to protect themselves, but what do you think they're after, or what do you think the future holds as they start to make more and more inroads into local government and local political apparatus?
Well, John, I think it's absolutely correct that there's a strong racial element to what the Proud Boys are going after, whether it's a Western chauvinist. I think that is absolutely a thinly veiled a fig leaf for what is largely a white nationalist agenda. I think what they're after is political power and the ability to espouse those views at the local level. The second thing that's very concerning is the realization among their senior leadership, particularly in the investigations following January 6th, that if they were to continue coordinating this at a national level, at a centralized level, that would make them more open potentially to investigation and prosecution, and to do what we've seen, frankly, terrorist groups do time and time again, and that's devolve the power structure to split up into small groups to sort of self-motivate, self-lead across the land, which makes it, from a law enforcement perspective, to the extent people are engaging in violence, to the extent people are planning to use violence to achieve political aims, that makes it much, much harder for the FBI and other law enforcement entities to find out what's happening and to get ahead of that and stop it before it occurs. So this is all concerning, but I think at the end of the day, the goal is political power towards what in many instances is a racial, and you read that to be a white nationalist agenda.